Hello, how are you?
Oh, fine, thanks. And you?
I'm doing well, thank you.
We are doing our podcast in English today. Oh,
Yes, we are.
Don't
because
you?
we have an incredible guest today.
Oh,
and we have to do this interview in English. And we are hoping to do some more interviews in English if this works out well.
Yeah, we are talking international level, right now. like Marida was our first, right? Was our first in English. Today we are having our second, and I don't know. Let's see many more. But what do you want to talk about today?
Well, today, because we are talking with someone that I really admire and that I consider to be a mentor, really, even though I've only seen her like a couple of times in person. The reality is that I've read her books, I read her blog, I listen to her podcast. She has so many amazing advice for freelancers, freelance translators specifically. And that I've taken a lot of what she teaches. And I was wondering, Paula, what your mentor has been in your career, or someone that you look up to and that you admire and that you have taken advice from.
That's a very, very good question. I cannot identify only one person, really. When I was a student, I remember I absolutely loved one of my translation teachers. He wasn't very, how can I say? He wasn't the most attractive man on earth in any sense, because he was a bit of a special person.
Okay.
Yeah, he was very special. But he knew a lot about translation, and he was a very good teacher. So I think he taught us very useful, how can I say? It was not like, no, you should do this way, or you should do that way, He was like, okay, you're going to get into the market and you're going to get a client that will want you to say some word the way they say that word, You have to talk the talk. So that phrase, talk the talk, helped me a lot, when I began to work as a translator, because we translators are very nerdy and we want to do our way, we want to do everything perfect, like the dictionaries and the RAE and every authority in the languages say, and clients, and another thing. Yeah. So that was one of the best, one of the best teachings I got. And then one of my friends, she's, I'm her son's godmother. We are very close friends, and we studied together the whole translation career. And she began working in a very large agency lots of years ago. So she's always some kind of beacon for me in the industry, because she knows a lot about the industry and knows a lot more than me.
That's great. I feel like the beacon in my career has been my mother. I don't know if people know this, but my mother is also a translator.
Yes.
So she was working way before I was working, and she was a incredible mentor for me when I decided to study translation and actually work as a freelance translator. But I think it's so important to have those people that you can reference and that are doing what you want to be doing. It's the best kind of advice that you can receive, to listen what they have to say and what their experiences have been, what mistakes they made that you can learn from. Ultimately, sometimes you just have to make the mistake yourself, though, to learn.
But that I was going to say that that experience is the best of all teachers.
That is the best teacher.
Because I'm a very hands-on experience person, I just sometimes I need to do something, understand what's going on with that thing. For example, I don't know, Post edition. Everybody's talking about post edition. Okay, what is post edition? You can ask, you can search for information, you can read the people who know or not, because there are lots of people talking about it. And sometimes it's like, okay, I'll do something.
Yeah, you just have to experience it for yourself.
You have to do it for yourself. You have to see it for yourself. And also, I think that nowadays with social media, there are lots of resources you can use as reference or to look for advice. Of course, we always try to, I don't know, check who's talking, because there's a lot, and a lot means a lot. So in that sense, our guest today is a very well-known voice in the translation industry, and she knows a lot, and she's very good, because her book is super, I found it very insightful for a beginner and more, because it's not only for beginners.
I would say it's a must read if you want to be a freelance translator.
Yes, I should have read it before, that's for sure. Because I just read it late. But no, it's never too late. But I really recommend it. It's very, 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 very good. So, I don't know. Marina is fangirling since the beginning of the year.
Yeah, I am. I'm so excited to talk to Corinne.
This is your pick.
Yes, it's a huge honor.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. So, well, we hope you enjoy it.
Yes, here we go.
Yay!
Today, we have the honor of having with us Corinne McKay. Corinne McKay is an ATA certified French to English translator and Colorado Court certified French interpreter based in Boulder, Colorado. A full-time freelancer since 2002, she specializes in international development, corporate communications, nonfiction book translation, and court legal interpreting. In addition to her translation work, Corinne has been writing books and teaching classes for other freelancers since 2006. Her book, How to Succeed as a Freelance Translator, has sold over 12,000 copies and has become the go-to reference for the translation and interpreting professions. Now retired from Translation Association volunteering, Corinne served on the board of the American Translators Association for 7 years, including serving as ATA president. Colleen, it's such an honor to have you here in pantuflas with us.
Thanks for inviting me. Yeah, great to talk to you guys.
Super excited, Corinne. You're a celebrity, so you're a celebrity. And
not so much, but thank
and
you.
Our we named our audience as podcast escuchas in Spanish. So I'm sure many podcast escuchas are going to be as thrilled as we are right now to listen to you.
Let's hope. Yeah.
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot for this. I have one very important question. Are you wearing your slippers right now?
Oh. I know, that's a funny question. So here's the crazy thing. No, okay. As a short answer, no, I'm wearing running shoes. But I usually, when there's not coronavirus, I work at a co-working office. So I actually wear, real clothes. Yeah, exactly. I actually wear real clothes. So this has been a whole, I think... how can we count the ways in which life has been disrupted in the past couple of months? And for me, that's one of them. Is weirdly enough, I don't, when everyone says, oh, for translators, life is just as normal because we're home all the time anyway. And I'm actually not. So that's my long-winded answer. But no, I am currently wearing running shoes.
Okay. You're trying to keep some things normal, like every day.
Like they were before.
Shoes. Yes,
correct. Correct.
Okay, it's okay. You can be here anyway,
Okay.
Whether
thanks
you
for letting me in.
Yes.
Thanks for letting me in.
You can stay. Yeah. Okay. Well, first of all, we're big fans of your work, of your book,
thank you so much.
of your blog, your podcast, everything. And of course, our first question is: what inspired you to write the book, How to Succeed as a Freelance Translator?
Yeah. So what I always say about that book is, maybe not the best guide to freelance business practices, but the first. So how it came about, I mean, honestly, was when I started freelancing in 2002, freelancing was much less common, I think, than it is now. When you read that some statistics about like a third of the US population earns at least some of their income through freelance or contract work. My guess would be it was much, much less in 2002. And to my knowledge, there were very few resources on how to start and run a freelance translation business. So honestly, now looking back on it, I probably wrote that book before I should have. Now when I think like, oh my God, I would never take business advice from someone who had been freelancing like 3-4 years. But it was more that I just thought, there clearly is a need for this kind of thing, because, one story I always tell is the first translation job I ever did, and the client said, send us your invoice. That's a pretty basic request, right? And I actually called my husband at work and said, what do I put on an invoice? Do I just say like, pay me $75? So, I mean, we laugh now. That sounds so ridiculous, but I just think even I had never been self-employed before. And so that's what led me to write that book, is that I thought, if I really struggled with all of this stuff, very basic things like writing a translation targeted resume, invoicing for that matter, other people must too. And so, there was the book. And then I wrote, once I knew a little more what I was talking about, I wrote 2 more editions of the book. So, but yeah, if anyone still has that antique version,
I think I have the first one. Yes.
With the dark blue cover with the illuminated manuscript. That's it. Yep.
I got the
I think it's an excellent book. And by the way, I recommend it to everyone. Get that book because it's full of great advice. I think it's amazing. Thank you so much for writing it.
It targets not only the basics, but a lot more, because those doubts about your resume or I don't know how to approach your clients or whatever are things that are still in many people that is not a beginner. You might have been working for years, but for example, you could have been working in-house or in a company, like
right.
Correct. Happened to me,
Yep.
And suddenly you're a freelancer and you don't know what to do with many things. So
exactly.
And then also your blog, Thoughts on Translation. I mean, the blog has helped so many translators around the world. In what ways, I'm curious to know, has helped you? You dedicate your time and your effort to writing this blog for so many years and writing about the profession.
Yeah. So there again, the problem is when you ask questions, like I might seem really organized and strategic on the outside. And then when you ask questions, I'm like not organized or strategic at all. So
don't worry, neither are we. So don't worry.
The way that blog started was in 2008. I had a friend who I'm still friends with here in Boulder who was what we would now call a social media consultant. I don't even know what she called it at that time. So she was teaching, get this, an in-person class on how to start a blog. So she's going to teach a class on how to start a WordPress blog, but it was in person and she just needed people to fill up the class. So I said, okay, like I'll go, I don't even understand really what blogging is, but I'll go. So I took the class and then I thought, well, what the heck, I went to this all day class. Let me just try this. So I think I had the good fortune of starting to blog when you could just sort of ramble about your life as a freelance translator. And people were very interested in that because not many people did it.
Right.
Whereas I think now, that's one piece of advice that I always give people who want to get into, content creation or blogging for other translators is you can't really just ramble about your life as a freelance translator or interpreter anymore and think that people will be that interested. You have to have a niche or some sort of better strategy than I had. But the thing is that over the years, as I started writing more books and teaching classes for freelance translators, that the blog is really the main marketing engine for that, which has now amounted to about half of my income. So about half of my income Yeah, about half of my income. I feel like I should put that friend on commission. You know?
Yes.
Yeah,
And she was
Informational.
pioneering the blogging. Yes.
Right. So now about half of my income comes from translation and interpreting, and about half comes from book royalties and online courses. And really, the blog is the main engine for that because, I mean, one just unsolicited piece of advice I would give to your listeners is any kind of content marketing, whether it's blogging or podcasting or anything like that, it can be incredibly successful as a marketing strategy, but you must be in it for the long term.
Yes.
It is a long-term, slow burning strategy.
Mm-hmm.
And I just think there's way too many people who think like, I'm going to write 3 blog posts and then the world will beat a path to my door to work with me. And, you know, the reason why that blog is so successful is because now there's 800 posts on it.
Wow.
And so if you Google something about how to become a translator, chances are one of the top results is going to be an article on that blog, either that I wrote or a lot of the guest posts are way better than what I write because people put more time into it. But yeah, I think, you know, that it started out just for fun and then it became strategic. But I just think, you know, when you hear people talking about these incredible business results that they get from blogging or podcasting or any type of content creation, it's because they put a ton of time and effort into that, not because they, you know, wrote 3 blog posts or did a podcast that died after 4 episodes. And now they have like more work than they can handle. It doesn't work that way.
Right. Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. Yes. And I also, I saw a pre-conference seminar at an ATA conference some years ago that you gave that was excellent also. And you do give classes online and then consulting services. What is the offering and how can people find that information?
Yeah, so you can find all of it at trainingfortranslators.com. So that's my translator-facing website. And over the years, again, it started out with, I just taught a class called Getting Started as a Freelance Translator. And that has now expanded into last year, I believe, as a company, we ran 12 to 14 online courses. And that spans like classes that I teach, classes that other people teach on different topics. Like right now, Michelle Hansen's teaching a medical translation class. We have a Microsoft Word skills and legal translation class coming up. Those are with Andy Ho and Paula Arturo. We have challenge groups. So yeah, it's expanded. It's really fun. And I think, again, like there's a big demand for that kind of thing. You know, online courses that you can do from home, but things that are pretty specialized. So yeah, I love, I was a high school teacher before I was a translator. So that, and there are a lot of things about it I don't miss, but I always missed the teaching part of it. And
there's your teaching soul.
It's a fun way to combine it. And in a true fit of coronavirus craziness, I just did a free session of Getting Started as a Freelance Translator that we got 900 people participate.
900 people?
File that one under what was I thinking? I thought maybe 75, like, you know, when the coronavirus hit, I think like all of us, I thought, you know, what could I do to help? Like, I don't have any medical skills. You know, and what could I do?
Right.
And so I thought, well, you know, people have a lot of time in their hands right now. And especially students, you know, have a lot of time on their hands. So maybe I could offer a free session of this class and offer it in sort of a MOOC, you know, model where you're not giving people individual feedback, but you just have a discussion group plus live sessions. Yeah. Well, I thought I was just going to run it myself. And I thought maybe 75 or 100 people. The first day, 250 people registered. And I'm like, oh my God, This is
This is
already
huge.
unmanageable. So, right, I checked my email after the first day and there's 250 registrations. And I thought, like, this is already nuts. So I recruited 18 translators I work with to be volunteer mentors in the group. And we ended up with 900 people from all over the world, like, tons in the US and Europe, but then China, Dubai, Thailand, all over.
Wow.
And cool. I think one of the really cool parts was tons of young people, even some high school students who said, like, my favorite subject is Japanese, and my mom found this course online and told me I should do it. So, yeah, that just wrapped up. That was a wild ride, but it went really well. And, thank you to the 18 brave people who said yes when I asked them to volunteer as mentors.
So it was you who ruined Zoom, right? It was you.
Maybe.
You were the one.
I know I had to get the extra capacity. Not only was the class free, but it ended up costing me money. Because I had
everybody connected?
Capacity Zoom account. I know, it was crazy.
Yeah, it was great. 900. It's a lot of people. That's a lot, really. What about your podcast? Speaking of translation, can you tell us more about it? How you started or what you talk about? Whatever.
Yeah, so my friend and colleague Yves Boulder and I host it together. We do it once a month. People think we do it more often because I think no one has time to listen, to stuff that comes out like every day. But yeah, we do it once a month. We talk about really once in a while we have interviews. I'd say we're maybe 25% interviews and 75% is just the two of us talking about various topics. But yeah, you can find all the archive at speakingoftranslation.com or, Apple Podcasts, all the places that people listen.
Wow.
I love the podcast, by the way. I'm a loyal listener, and I love that that you cover a lot of things from the business side of things, which is really a lot of what translators need, aside from the specialization, like the business side of things. Like, how do I do this? How do I manage this? And I love that you cover that.
Yeah, it's the hardest part.
Yes. So translators going freelance are usually fearful of going 100% freelance. What advice do you have for translators looking to start as a freelance translator or transitioning to a freelance career?
Yeah, so I think if it helps people narrow down the options, I think that there are only a limited number of ways to do that. And you need to think about mostly what's your risk tolerance and what are your financial resources. Yeah. So I think, the least stressful way to start a freelance business is to save up a bunch of money. So that you are not dependent on at least a full-time freelance income for, I'd say, at least a year and maybe 2 years. So people who say, I have 18 months of living expenses in the bank. And I figure that's going to allow me to, start freelancing without having income pressure. Because I think the hard thing is when you're stressed about money, you make bad business decisions. Like all of us could probably share horror stories, right? Yeah. About the project you knew you shouldn't take.
Yeah, we do. We do.
Right. I mean, maybe that's another episode. We could do it anonymously.
Yeah, we do.
But I just think, if you're honest, all of us have those horror stories about the project you knew that you shouldn't take, but you took it because you were worried about money. So I think the thing to think about is the least stressful way to do it. And seeing now, literally probably thousands of students come through my classes. I've seen people do it all of those ways. The people who are the least stressed are the people who have a significant savings account or someone else's income to rely on so that they don't have to be earning a full-time income right away. The people who are the most stressed, and I've seen people do this, are people who say, I'm cutting the cord. Tomorrow, I am giving my 2 weeks notice at my full-time job. And because I know that I have no other way to make money, I'm just going to jump without a net. I've seen people do that too. I don't recommend that unless you have a very high risk tolerance. And I think realistically, the way most people do it is ramp up their freelance work, and hopefully dial back their salary job work, until the freelance work is enough that they know that they could live off it if they did it full time. Now, the hard part is that at least in the US, it is relatively difficult to find well-paying part-time work that offers benefits. So in reality, I think what most people who choose that strategy end up doing is at some point almost working 2 full-time jobs, working like 1.75 jobs, because they're at their full-time job all day, and then they come home, eat dinner, work, 3 to 4 hours every weeknight, and then basically full-time on the weekends. But I think that also, again, it's not super risky, because you sort of, dial up the freelance work until you say, if I feel confident now that if I were doing this full time, I would have enough work and I would make enough money. Yeah. And I think those are sort of the 3 main ways to do it. And I think when you're looking at stuff like that, any major decision in your business, you want to look at all of the options, not just all of the good options. I think it's important to say, this possibility, it is an option. I'm not saying it's a great option, but it is an option that you say, okay, I'm going to quit my full-time job and try to do this full-time. And if I really can't make it work, then I'm just going to get a fill-in part-time job doing something else.
Right.
Yeah. What I loved about, I loved your book, but I loved how you emphasize this idea that this is not instantaneous, You're
Far
not
from it,
going to earn money the first month you're a freelancer. And I think this is very important, because there's some kind of magical expectations about that sometimes, And of course, you're going to put all your effort, but you have to wait, and you have to be able to wait for it to bloom, because it's not quick.
Right.
So, and you say that in your book many times, and I found it really, really, really important.
Well, and I think with anything, one of my main pieces of advice would be, it always takes longer and is more work than you wish it were, or than you think it's going to be. Like when I mean, that's a whole other topic, is when I decided that I wanted to study for the court interpreter exam. And then after I passed it, and people said, "Oh, that's so amazing that as a translator, you were able to pass that." And I said, I studied 400 hours. And that's just the direct studying for the exam. So I did a lot of other stuff on top of that, like to improve the speed of my French speaking and my interpreting delivery. I mean, really, it was probably more like 500 hours. But I just think, anything in your business is going to take longer and be more difficult than you think it's going to be. And it's the people who keep swimming that succeed.
Yeah, sure. It's very common here in Argentina, for example. It's very common to hear, "Oh, translators earn a lot of money." Okay. Who are you looking at? It's okay. But it's not overnight, And lots of young or beginners or whatever, they are just looking at the successful person.
Right.
That successful person has come a long way to be there. So they are not looking at the effort behind. As you said, you studied 400 hours. You were not, today I'm going to take an exam. No.
Right.
It's
and I
like
think,
that.
Yeah, anybody who tells you, I have this way that you can get a lot of really interesting work and make a ton of money as a freelancer, and it's not hard or frustrating. Like, don't believe
They're lying to you. Liars.
Right. Don't trust anything that person says. Because I think, all of us who have established freelance businesses would say there's absolutely no way to, run a thriving freelance business that is not a lot of work and at times really frustrating.
Yeah. Exactly. And Corinne says it, okay? It's not me nor Marina. It's Corinne McKay, you people. Listen to her. Okay, well, speaking of, one of the most common concerns for translators is knowing how much to charge.
Mm-hmm.
Your most popular blog entry is, in fact, how much do freelance translators earn? Is it enough?
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any advice on how to price your services?
I do. And I even have, I guess my biggest piece of advice was I have even developed a worksheet. I don't know if we can find a way for you guys to put it in your show notes, or we'll put a link to it or something. But I'll give you the basic idea is I just think here's how most translators or interpreters price their work is by saying, gee, I wonder how much clients would pay me to do this. Let me go see what a client offers. When I think in reality, what you want to do is figure out how much do you need to earn in order to reach your financial goals. Or what I usually say is have the same level of financial security as someone with a traditional job. And what does that break down into in terms of an hourly or per word rate? So if we can find a way to get you guys the worksheet, you can use that, or basically you can add up all of the expenses that you need to cover in your business and personal life, how many hours you want to work, let's say per week. And I think another mistake people make is thinking, I'm going to bill 40 hours a week. Well, as a freelancer, if you're billing 40 hours a week, you're probably working 50 or 60 hours a week, because there is tons of stuff that you might call, like a translator named Jonathan Hine, who I took a lot of business advice from when I was a beginner translator, uses the term overhead. Like you don't rent a storefront, but whenever you are not, typing words or speaking, depending on if you translate or interpret, you're not making money, right? So marketing, accounting, giving quotes on jobs that don't end up happening, doing professional development, updating your LinkedIn profile, listening to this podcast, even cleaning your office. You know what I mean? Those are things that contribute to the success of your business, but that you are not directly paid for. So, and I think the other thing too is like, it's a lot of money. Like if you want to earn as a freelancer an amount of money that gives you the same level of financial security as someone with a traditional job, where you think, I'm not worried that I would be homeless if I got sick and couldn't work for 3 months. I can buy a house if I want to. I can put money in the bank to, for my children's future, for my retirement security. Like my husband has a salaried job. And when I look at all of the stuff that his employer provides, that we provide for ourselves, you have to make a lot. And I'm not saying that to be discouraging. I'm saying just because I think it's something we have to accept is that, especially if you live in a country that charges a pretty steep self-employment tax, you have to make a lot as a freelancer in order to achieve that similar level of financial security to someone with a traditional job.
Yeah, it's very interesting what you say, because many of us, or at least I speak for me, I worked in companies for more than 20 years. So I've always seen myself as an employee, when you begin working as a freelancer, you have to stop thinking of yourself as an employee, because if you make this question like, okay, how many hours I'm going to work every day? Okay, 8, like in my usual job, but it's not your usual job, because those 8 hours you are in the office, there are some other things that are done or paid by someone else. Right. But when you're working alone, it's up to you. It's not just having money for food or for rent or for whatever, living. It's your computer. If your computer breaks, it's your health. It's a lot of things, the taxes, there are lots of expenses that you have to think about. Right. And many of us do not do that math job when thinking about money.
Like, if I always say to people too, if you're not there now, then have it be a goal. Like if
Right.
you're at that point now, that doesn't mean
Yeah.
that you're a failure as a freelancer. What it means is, work toward that. Like if you don't have, I think people who have had a major work slowdown due to the coronavirus now understand, if they didn't before, the importance of a business savings account.
Mhm.
And if you didn't have that going into the coronavirus situation, it doesn't mean that you're a horrible business person, but what it means is start now.
Right.
And if you feel like I don't earn enough money to do that, well, could you take $25 every 2 weeks? Like all of us waste money. I mean,
Yes.
could you, like, instead of never putting anything in, if you had at least put, $25 every 2 weeks, maybe that would have bought you a couple of weeks of not panicking about where, you're like, if you had $600 in a business savings account, which would have been, $50 a month for a year, then at least maybe that would have bought you a little wiggle room. Or, people who are interpreters and think, well, I have to set up this remote interpreting setup in my house to have work now, and that costs money. Well, even if you had $500, maybe you could have set that up. Or used the downtime to do some professional development and take online courses that cost money. So I just think also many things in your business, if you think of it as all or nothing, you'll never do it. But if you start somewhere and just say, well, if I think of, paying myself every 2 weeks as if I had a traditional job, could I take $25 out of every paycheck? Sure, you could. I mean, you have to be living off very, very little money if you couldn't afford $25 out of every paycheck, and then you would have had something.
Right. I love what you're saying about working towards the goal also.
Yes.
So maybe you're not there yet, but this is where you want to be. So work towards that. I love that. And Corinne, so in this is our third season of Pantuflas.
Woo.
And yes, so every season we ask our guests a question at the end. And this season, the third season, we are asking guests this futuristic question or philosophical, whatever you would like to call it. If you were able to travel back in time to when you first started out as a translator and give yourself one piece of professional advice, what would that be?
That's so hard because I made so many mistakes.
We all have.
When I was a beginning freelancer, but I would say, I wish I had been less afraid to walk away early from things that were doomed to fail. And I wish I had kept going a tiny bit at a time towards goals that would take a long time.
Yes.
I mean, both of those. So for example, with my interpreting thing, the reason why it took me 400 hours is because I let interpreting completely drop for 10 years. And the thing is, even if I had practiced a half an hour a week, I mean, that sounds like, such a tiny amount, but even if I had practiced a half an hour a week, I wouldn't have been starting from zero. So I think something that, if you have a book translation that you're working on, translate 1 page a week. And you know what? In 400 weeks, you'll be done. But if you don't work on it ever, you won't ever be done.
Small steps.
It's better to be done in 8 years than never. Right?
Yeah, exactly.
So that I would say. And when you have something that you don't want to do anymore, or a line of business that is failing, I wish I had been less afraid to walk away early from things I knew I didn't want to do anymore.
Right. Yeah, it's the being afraid of losing the opportunity and then maybe not being contacted again. A lot of translators are afraid of saying no because they're afraid the client then won't contact them again.
Yep.
That's a common fear. But also I like, I was thinking, I don't know where I heard this, that people who climb mountains usually don't focus on the peak. They're usually just focusing on the trail in front of them. And it's the step by step that gets you to the top. If you're focusing on the peak and it looks so far away and so difficult, you won't get there because you get frustrated along the way.
Well, here's a cool quote along those lines. So I have translated a couple of mountaineering biographies. Those are actually like some of my favorite translations I ever did.
Oh,
And I came
wow.
across this quote. Yeah. So a guy named Reinhold Messner, who was, there's 14 mountains in the world that are over 8,000 meters tall. And he was the first person to climb all of them without oxygen.
Oh, wow.
And when someone asked him, how did you do that? He said 2 words, always slowly.
Wow.
So what
I
he
like
meant,
that.
yeah. So what he meant was, you know, he never stopped. He just consistently did it very slowly, you know? Right. And
Yeah.
how do you climb the 14 biggest mountains in the world? Just literally one step at a time. So I think that's
One
a
step
good,
at a time.
right. Inspiration for your listeners is right.
Yeah.
Always slowly.
Always
I
slowly.
love that.
I love that phrase.
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
Thank you
Okay.
so much, Corinne. This has
It's
been
been
such a
great.
treat for us to be able to
me too.
interview.
A nice break in the quarantine for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, you know, the quarantine is not stopping us because
Yeah.
we've always
No.
been doing this from our homes.
Right. Yeah.
So, in your face, virus.
Yeah.
Now, Corinne, it's been a real pleasure. And I really, really advise everyone listening to read Corinne's book or Corinne's blog or listen to her podcast because it's very, very inspiring and informative. So we need to think and to read about.
Yes.
So thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thanks for
Corinne.
having me.
Este fue un nuevo episodio de En Pantuflas, patrocinado por nuestro amigo fiel, MemoQ. Si sos tan fan de MemoQ como nosotras, aprovecha el 45% de descuento exclusivo para podcast escuchas. Anota este código, CAM-pantuflas45. Podés encontrar todos los episodios del podcast en nuestra página en _pantuflas.com y suscribirte para escucharlos apenas salen en iTunes, Spotify y Google Podcast. Prohibida su reproducción en la Argentina, en Los Ángeles, Buenos Aires, Pantuflas al virus.